So season 1 of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man has officially wrapped up, and guys, I have a lot of thoughts. I remember going into the show thinking it wasn't going to be very good thanks to the awful marketing, and I'm not going to lie, the show is actually kind of good, surprisingly. Let me start off with my positives before getting into a few of my negatives. So for starters, I think the story is what really sold this show for me, because this is basically an alternate version of the MCU that we get to see through Spider-Man's perspective. And I'm not gonna lie, this actually gave me what I've wanted from the MCU Spider-Man for the longest time. If you've seen my channel before, you would know I'm not the biggest fan of the way the MCU handles Peter Parker, but this show is what I have been begging Marvel to do for the longest time with his character. I love how the show shows us a lot of the things we would expect from the MCU without making it the main focus. The main focus is always on Spider-Man and the Spider-Man characters, which I really did appreciate. Another thing I thought was great was how these characters were handled. For example, I really love what they did with Norman Osborn in this universe. I was interested to see how they would handle Norman being Peter's mentor over Tony Stark being his mentor in the MCU. And their relationship is what the show decides to focus on the most. But where it differs from the MCU is that Norman obviously has some sinister intentions, and him and Spider-Man's relationship feels kinda sketchy. And I love how multiple times throughout the show, Peter actually wants to just do things on his own. He even says to Norman, I appreciate the offer, but I don't know if this is what I should be doing as Spider-Man, which is something that we never got to see from the MCU. I also really liked the supporting cast. Lonnie Lincoln is a great character, and I think it is so tragic that he is going to go on to become Tombstone, because man, once Spider-Man has to fight him, it is going to be absolutely insane. I also really enjoyed Nico and Harry. Having Harry be Peter's guy in the chair was really interesting to see, and I also really like the relationship between him and Nico. Having Peter have some friends instead of being alone like he usually is was nice to see. And I know that Spider-Man usually has friends, it's just that in this show, he isn't the ultimate punching bag for the school. He isn't relentlessly bullied like a lot of other Spider-Men were. I also really enjoyed how the show handled other Marvel characters appearing. When they show up, they are never taking away from Spider-Man's story, and I also really enjoy seeing his dynamic with characters like Daredevil or Doctor Strange. Another thing I think this show handled very well was the villains. This season decides to focus a lot on Dr. Octopus, Scorpion, and Norman Osborn, and they are kind of the main villains for this season. As mentioned previously, I think Norman Osborn is a very sinister force, and I really like seeing how sketchy he really is being with Peter, not telling him everything that he's doing, including stealing his powers and indirectly giving them to him, which I'll mention a little bit more later. It was nice to see Otto Octavius being set up, and I really like his relationship with Norman. It reminds me a lot of their relationship in the Insomniac Spider-Man games. But easily the best part of the show was Scorpion. Not only did I really like the stuff that they did with him and Lonnie Lincoln's gang, the 1/10th, but also him being the villain that scares Spider-Man, straight up traumatizes him and makes him really question if he's ready to be Spider-Man, was so interesting to see. And the fight between them was surprisingly brutal. Like, they actually showed blood and they did not hold back. I was like, damn, we're finally getting serious Spider-Man again. This is what I've been wanting the MCU to do for the longest time. Seriously, bring back Michael Mando as the Scorpion. That post-credit scene feels like forever ago. Another thing I really enjoyed seeing was Peter being intelligent and making his own gadgets, his web fluid, making his own suit. It was stuff that I really wish we got to see from the MCU, but I'm glad we got to see it here. These are the type of things I like to see a Spider-Man doing, because his intelligence is a big part of his character, and it feels sorely missed in the MCU. But those are about all of my positives. Now it's time to get into things I'm a little bit mixed or negative on. While the art style actually did end up growing on me, and I still really like the art style for the most part, I think the main issue I have with the show is its animation. When the characters are talking or doing simple movements, I just think it looks really weird. It just feels very cheap, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. I will say, I think most of the budget is being spent towards the fight scenes and the swinging scenes, because during those scenes, the animators kind of lock the fuck in, and it looks a lot better. It looks more competent. I still would like the animation to be better looking, but during those scenes, that is where the animation peaks. Not gonna lie though, it is a little sad that a budgeted TV show was able to give us better swinging scenes than the MCU ever did. I also wasn't a big fan of just having these suits from the comics be used as nothing more than, oh, Norman made them and now Peter has to test them out. I would have rather them made original designs for the show than just take designs that already have an established history and just slap it onto there. It just felt very weird. And while I do like Peter Parker in this show, I think he can be a bit too cringy at times. Like, some of the lines that he says, I will just roll my eyes at, and I'm like, was that really necessary? I don't understand why the writers feel the need to write an unfunny Spider-Man. I just hope that kind of stops in the future, because it is just a little bit too cringy at times, I'm not gonna lie. Another thing I didn't totally love, but didn't totally hate either, was the reveal that Spider-Man was always destined to be Spider-Man. It turns out it wasn't multiverse shenanigans like I thought it was before the show came out. The show basically reveals that it was actually time travel this whole time, and that point in time where Spider-Man gets his spider bite is actually from the present, which we see in episode 10, where he is fighting the alien creature with Doctor Strange, and then a portal opens up to the past, and then that's what gives him his powers. It just feels a little bit convoluted and weird. I would have preferred something more simple, but I also don't mind it. It wasn't executed horribly per se. I just don't really know how to feel about it right now. But to end the video on a positive note, I'm gonna say some more positives and then just wrap up my thoughts on the show. I will say I really did enjoy the fighting scenes and the swinging scenes. The swinging scenes were really cool to look at because of the way the camera moved with Peter, and I like all of the different things he's doing while he's in the air. I just thought it looked very cool. And the fighting scenes were really awesome and very tense in a lot of moments, especially the fight scenes with Scorpion. Those were the best ones. Very high action. I love how brutal Scorpion is, and I really liked getting to see that scene where Spider-Man finally decides not to hold back, and he literally almost kills the Scorpion, and it is then when Lonnie Lincoln is the one to tell Spider-Man, listen, this isn't who you are, you need to be that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It was such a nice character moment, and this was all caused by Norman, who previously said to Peter that he should stop holding back. So it was really interesting to see stuff like that in the show. Overall, I am very pleased with this show. I would give it a 6 out of 10. I still don't like it as much as something like Spectacular Spider-Man or the 90s series, but I think it is very good, and I think Spider-Man fans will enjoy it, but be warned, it does kind of rehash a lot of the things we've come to see from stuff like the MCU Spider-Man, and if you're kind of tired of that and want something different from Spider-Man, then you should probably stay away from the show. I'm interested to see what they will do in the future, but I will admit, the reveal of Gwen Stacy and Spider-Gwen does have me a bit worried. I kind of like what we have going on right now, Peter being Spider-Man, focusing on him and his villains with some MCU flavor on the side, but I have faith that they can make it work. But that is all for today, and I'll see you in whatever my next project ends up being.